Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our April webinar. And we are so happy that you are able to join us. So just a reminder of our format that we do every single month. We started this in January of 2021 when we debuted the Flourish brand. So on our monthly webinar, we will always have a timely topic. It might be something that's timeline driven, or it might be something that we just feel is really important that we talk about, that we create conversation around. So this evening, we're going to be talking about college majors where students need to commit in high school. And as I was polling people at the colleges and independent counselors, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in this. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. As we do every month, we'll take your questions through the Q&A feature. And so drop those into the question and answer feature. We will take questions at the end. Occasionally we have invited speakers. We did in January and we are again in May, and I'll be announcing our topic at the end this evening. If you want to continue the conversation with us, please just join us over in our private Facebook community, Launch Career Clarity. And there will be an email going out to all registrants and attendees after we are finished. Today, actually, it'll go out tomorrow evening at this time. So without further ado. So we are talking today about college majors where a student needs to have clarity on whether they want to pursue this major or not while they're still in high school. There's a lot of controversy around this. So the reason being is there's a lot of pressure on our kiddos. As I enter into conversations around this, we talk about stress being at an all-time high, especially coming off the pandemic. Students are stressed out. They feel like this is a giant decision, and it seems unfair sometimes to make students get clarity on some of these majors ahead of time. As we enter into this conversation, I want to remind everybody, I don't enter into this conversation saying that undeclared majors are wrong, or that pursuing a liberal arts degree isn't a good option. I don't believe either of those two things. But what I do know is whether we think it's fair or not for students in high school to have career clarity around some areas, that is the way that some college majors work, and that is the way that some universities work. So regardless of whether we feel it's fair or not, the system in many ways says there are areas where we have to rule it in or out sooner rather than later. And that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. Now, here's why. Here's why it matters. So colleges admit students in several different ways. So some colleges admit students directly to the college major. Other colleges admit you to the college within the university. So in a university, they might have a College of Arts and Sciences, College of Engineering, a business school. So they've got lots of different ways that they can, those are some common ones. So they have lots of different ways that they can organize. And in some colleges, like for instance, computer science is a great example. In many colleges, computer science is housed within the engineering school, but at some colleges, it's housed within the arts and sciences school. So colleges structure, first of all, they vary in what majors they offer. They structure it differently by school. And so there are schools within the university. So at some schools, when you're applying to the college, but not necessarily to the major. So you might apply, a good example of this would be where you apply perhaps to the engineering school, you're admitted as pre-engineering, and then after that first year or so, depends on what the college decides, you then choose your specific major within the College of Engineering. And then other colleges admit students to the university, and they do not have to have clarity even on what college within the university they want. So as teens are navigating this landscape and they're looking at colleges either online or in person, so there's more and more of those in-person opportunities available these days, which is awesome. As they're doing that, you need to ask, what will the application look like in the fall of the senior year? Will we be applying to the university, a college within the university, or a specific major? So that's the first thing that you want to lead by. So colleges, whether we think it's fair or not, many colleges admit to the major. Now, we look at stats on students. It's approximately, and I say approximately because every year this stat changes just slightly up or down. It's actually been on an upward trend, which is fantastic. So actually about 40% of students who start college actually have earned a degree in 4 years. The average amount, so some of those students drop out, but if you look at completers, the average amount of time is over 5 years. So we need to keep that in mind. Massive college major changes can extend the time in school. Now, while it's true that the majority of students do change their major in college, my experience after coaching well over 3,000 students is that students who are informed, know themselves, and know careers have fewer college major changes, or they even have, even if we're not looking at like major changes, if they do have major changes, it's usually smaller changes. When a student is accepted to school, so if you are on a budget and you do not have the luxury of finishing your degree in 5 or 6 years and going into college and experimenting and trying on different majors for size, and you need to get in and out in 4 years, this might apply to you. So when you're awarded merit scholarships, as students are awarded merit scholarships at a university, those scholarships are good for 4 years in college. It doesn't matter if the student takes 5 or 6 years to graduate. So those scholarships almost always are good for only 4 years. The other part of this is if you're going to be utilizing the federal student loan and you max it out every single year, there is a cap on how much money the student can take. Now, this is the one and only vehicle of students taking out loans in their own name where they don't need a co-signer on the loan. So the cap on these loans is $31,000 over the course of your education. That doesn't have to be done in 4 years. However, if a student starts in their freshman year, taking out the maximum amount that they are permitted to take out that first year, which is $5,500, and then second year, $6,500, and then after that, it's $7,500. If they max it out, they're going to be at $27,000 at the end of 4 years in college. If they go into that 5th year, they're up against that $31,000 cap. And now they're down to, in that 5th year, only having $4,000 available. So, at times I just feel like it's a luxury to be able to take 5 or 6 years that some kids do. Some families can afford that, others cannot. Depending on your college budget, depends on how you need to inform yourself and handle the decisions that are in front of you. Now, here are the most popular majors where we find some issues with changing majors. Now, how did I get this information? And I think I'll actually even pull over some quotes and give them to you here in just a sec. So I belong to professional groups, and I'm well connected with many, many independent counselors. So within some of the groups that I belong to, I just started threads of conversation. And I said, so one group, I was talking only to independent counselors. And I said, in your experience with working with students, where have you found issues with changing majors if the student didn't apply to this college while they were still in high school? And this is the list that came up. I then posed this same question to another group that I'm part of. And in that group, there were college admissions officers in there. There were high school counselors in there, and there were independent counselors in there as well. The list matched exactly the same. And in the group, actually in both conversations, but specifically the second group, the colleges were actually speaking up as well. So let me give you, and I'm going to pull onto my other screen for a second so I can just read to you guys. Let me give you some of the quotations that I got from the colleges, and just from people giving me their opinions on anecdotal experience. So business. At certain schools, it is impossible if you are not admitted to the business school at the time of application. Now, these are two very elite schools, Wharton at University of Pennsylvania and Notre Dame. It is also impossible to transfer into, so these are all bullet points that came from different sources. Another source said it's impossible to transfer into the business college from another college within the university at Boston College and Bucknell. So what that indicates is if you're admitted to the business college, and let's say you want to change majors from, let's say, finance to marketing, it would be an unusual change, but let's say that that's the change that a student wanted to make, but they're already in the business college, that might be possible. But if they're outside, let's say they're in the arts and sciences college and they want to transfer into the business college, one of the counselors said she's found that had students where it was impossible at Boston College and Bucknell. Very difficult was Ross, which is the business college at the University of Michigan. I have had experience with students who don't start at Farmer Business School at Miami University in Ohio, having difficulty getting in. Somebody also mentioned that at Kelly, which is Indiana University's business school, that 1B minus knocks you out of contention for transferring into the business school. So now a lot of people said too, you don't have to major in business in your undergrad to later go on and get an MBA. And that is a very true statement. So keep that in mind. Engineering. Engineering is going to be very difficult to get admitted to a graduate program without a bachelor's degree. Engineering can be a very, very challenging one, if not impossible to transfer. One great engineering example is, and this one is interesting, I've never asked them about this, but I verified it again today on their website because I'm one for not wanting to give misinformation. Sometimes I will not give information just to not give misinformation if I'm not up to date on checking something. So at Johns Hopkins University, you can transfer into other engineering majors. Every program in the university is open for transfer with the exception of biomedical engineering. They accept no internal or external transfers at all. Computer science. Diane Sobieski, from the director of admissions at Champlain College, said game design and game art for them is impossible to change your major into if you did not apply in high school. Computer science is probably the major that I would say has gotten far more competitive in recent years than any other major. That is the one that we've just seen on this huge upswing of selectivity. I think 10 years ago, even 8 years ago, if we were exploring this option of transferring into computer science as a major, we would have found very different answers. I'm currently have a senior that I'm working with who applied to Purdue to computer science as his first major, was not admitted, but was admitted to data science. He thought, oh, I'll just go in data science and transfer over. And now he's discovering that that may not be possible. So things to keep in mind. Nursing. Lisa from Seattle Pacific University, she works there, she said that they only hold 5 transfer spots out of 32 spots every year. Danielle Toglia, regional manager at San Diego State University, said it is impossible to transfer into nursing at San Diego State if you never started there. John Rice, Associate Director of Admissions from the University of San Francisco, said it broke his heart. We actually got into an exchange. He said it broke his heart recently this spring to have to tell families that they are never able to change their major to nursing at their institution. We have no internal major changes and only 90 spots or so per year for external transfers. So that's an interesting one. A college who says if you start at our university in another major, you cannot then later go into nursing. But if you start at another university, we do have some limited number of spots for students to come into our nursing program from other institutions. So that's an interesting one. Architecture and pharmacy, audition or portfolio based in the arts. So Mallory Melton Ray from Middle Tennessee State University said, so do you see I've got a mix here of elite colleges and less selective colleges. So we're all over the place, and this still applies. She said, at Middle Tennessee State University, there's not enough time to get all the studio and ensemble requirements in if you do not start in their Bachelor of Fine Arts program directly from high school. Another one, a past transfer admissions counselor for Newman State University. She was talking specifically with nursing, but also other health sciences. She said, when I worked on the 4-year side as a transfer counselor, so her job was only to deal with transfers, we had very specific requirements for nursing transfers, and we had very limited spots. Also, occupational therapy was the same. I worked at a different school that had a fantastic OT program, but did not allow transfer students at all. Education. This education one surprised me a little bit. Education was a major one. Students had, this came from Erin McHugh, former director of enrollment management at Temple University. She said education was a major one. Students had a very regimented set of classes and practicums / student teaching that they needed in order to graduate and get licensed. Students who tried to save money by going to community college first often, which is a great strategy a lot of times for saving money on college, but it didn't work at Temple for education. She said if students started there and then transferred for education, they had to start all over. So if they had done 2 years at the community college, and I'm giving you guys all these quotes because I think it informs you on what questions you need to be asking as you do your visits. So what she was saying to us, what Erin was saying was they went 2 years to a community college thinking that they would transfer in and only have 2 more years to go for their 4-year degree. And they had to start all over. So there we go, spent 6 years getting their bachelor's degree. Another Pennsylvania admissions officer, students who tried to save money by going to community college had to start all over again. That was enough. 2 people said that in the same conversation. And then finally, film studies. This is one I got a little surprised by. Tara, who is an associate dean of admissions at Wesleyan University, said film studies for them. Film studies, our course sequences don't really work for transfer students. It might be possible for a sophomore, but by junior year, it's a no-go. Evie, who works as an admissions counselor at Loyola Marymount, said film studies is, quote, impossible. So I share that with you all to help inform the types of questions you need to be asking when you're doing your college visits. And you might not get it, if you're just getting a campus tour and a general admissions, talk, you may not get your questions answered there. Your student, not the parents, your student needs to engage the university and ask these questions. Now, you heard me talk about internal and external major changes. So let's just talk again let's review what those are. So changing your majors, you want to know if that door is going to be open for you, right? So there are changes of majors within the college. That's where I'm admitted to the business college, I'm finance, and I want to switch over to marketing. Is that possible? So that's one question that you want to ask. And what you might find, and so you need to ask it of all the colleges that you're considering at a university, what you might find is in one school, in the business school, maybe that's permitted, but maybe that's not permitted in the engineering school. Okay. Then you want to ask, if I came into the business school and I wanted to change over to the arts and sciences school or vice versa, would that be possible? So changing colleges. So those are two types of internal transfer or major changes. You also want to ask, if I come in undecided, are there any majors that would be closed off to me? So there was one school that a client of mine was interacting with, and the school is very friendly towards undeclared majors, so undecided. However, there were a couple of majors at this particular institution where if the student went that direction, they wanted to go that direction later, those doors would not be open to them. So we need to be asking these questions so we're making informed decisions. And then external transfer is when I'm attending a different university and I end up transferring over to your school. So that San Francisco one was super interesting, where for nursing, you couldn't switch colleges if you were already admitted to their university, but if you were coming from elsewhere, you could. So you really need to ask before, I think you should ask before you apply. You've got to at least ask before you pay a deposit. So here I am showing you over here on the left, my template that I used, and I will be emailing this out to everybody that was registered. So the template's just basically a form. This email should be sent by the student, not by the parent. And you're asking what the opportunities are. What I have in the blue box is, I've written these types of emails many times over the years. What I have in the blue box here is when I sent this last week to a university and how they replied. So I took my template and I asked the questions I wanted to ask, and I got this very friendly response. Hi, Lisa, it's great to hear from you. You would think that I was her long lost friend. I don't know this lady. So I randomly picked a college and I randomly picked a university and sent the email, and she's acting like we're buddies. At this point now, the door was open and I sent her some follow-up questions to which she replied. So I got fantastic information. You know, I'm always telling families that, when you're looking to talk to people about their jobs, people who love their jobs are more than willing to talk to teens and young adults who are considering those careers. The colleges are the same way. Okay. I know it seems cutthroat. We've read in the news all about the surge in applications this year, in part due to test optional and COVID, that some of the universities have record low admission rates, some even below 5%, but that's not the majority of schools. And even at those schools, they're still very, very friendly to answering your questions. So I hope everybody, in my template, I'm also going to have like, what is the information that you are trying to understand? So sometimes it can be found on the website. So check the website first and then send an email. Now, when you're sending an email, in the case of this one where, what was her name? Emily. When Emily said, hi, Lisa, it's so great to hear from you. I did not email admissions. I went over to the particular college within the university. So in this case, I went to the engineering college because I know that's a super common one for this to not work. So I went to the engineering college, and typically each college will have a person or a team of people who are basically recruiters for that, or admissions professional or recruiters, representatives for that college. And if you poke around enough on the college specific site within the university, you can usually find contact information. And that's what I did. And so I just emailed the first person on the list. This was her job. It's to interact with people like this, sent her the email. She gave me this site. Now, what I came back to her with What she didn't give me right away, and we never ever want to forget, these colleges are business, right? So they are selling you just as a student is selling the college on, hey, accept me. The college is selling you, hey, apply and then enroll here. They need paying bodies at their university, particularly after COVID and its effects financially on the universities. So what she didn't say to me, she said, oh yeah, transfers possible, internal and external. Here's the information. When I went over and I followed the link, I saw the GPAs that were required, and it was worded as the minimum GPA for consideration. My reply email back to Emily was, so, and I didn't ask about, this past year. I went 2 years ago. I said, so 2 years ago, let's not look at the COVID data. 2 years ago, what was, if 3.4 college GPA was the minimum to be considered for internal transfer, please tell me what was the average GPA of the kids who were actually given an opportunity to internal transfer. In some of the more selected programs, it was pretty high. So there were a lot of kids that actually met that 3.4, but did not get the opportunity to transfer majors because they only had so many spots. So just because you meet the minimum doesn't mean that you're going to get it. So you want to ask them, okay, that's great that the minimum's 3.4. How many students applied in 2019? How many got a place in that major? And of the students who were permitted to transfer, do an internal major change, what was their average GPA? So, we're always aiming for at least as average or higher. What were their stats? So you need to ask that as well. So with that, I hope that's really super helpful to everybody. It was great having everyone on. So what I want to do now is if anybody has a question, anything career related, we can go ahead and you can drop it into the question and answer feature. While I'm waiting to see if there are any questions that you all have, next month on May 10th is our May webinar at 7:30. We will be discussing strategies for empowering and really freeing your student to find their own path. We as parents, we talked about this in the launch community recently. Some of us were saying, like, it's really hard to not try to influence our kiddos sometimes. So we've got Pranoy coming on. He lives in New Jersey, and he was headed into one career path and felt a tremendous amount of pressure by his family and others to pursue that career path. And we're going to hear his story about how he found his own path. And from that, and Pranoy is young. He's not old like me. He's not in his 50s like I am. He's young. And so I thought, you know what, it's great to hear from someone who's out of school and a professional, but had some issues navigating this, and he came out on the other side, and I think he's got wisdom for all of us. So okay, I've got a question that came in. If anybody else has questions too, please send them in. I want to go into medical school to become a pediatrician. What classes are good to take? Okay, tell me, the person that's asking this, are you talking about what high school classes you should take to pursue that as a career, or are you talking about when you are in college? So while I'm waiting for that individual to give me a little bit more information on, are we talking about what classes to take in high school or college? Let me speak to the college piece. So for people who eventually, both high school classes and college. Okay, so let's talk about college real quick. If you want to go to medical school, actually, I was meeting with a student today who is exploring either engineering, is looking at aerospace or mechanical, and is looking at maybe being a physician's assistant. So for medical school and PA school, there are certain courses that need to be taken, but it doesn't matter what your college major is. So you could be a communications major And as long as you took all the prerequisite science classes, mainly science, but there's psychology, medical terminology, those classes, that's really what dictates it. So you're able to look at different medical schools and you're going to see like 2 years of biology with lab, 2 years of chemistry with lab, anatomy and physiology, medical terminology, and then your standard like composition, things like that. So that's in college. In high school, what classes would be helpful for a student who is headed down the medical path? So if you're ready for AP Rigor, AP Bio, AP Chem, two challenging courses, I've had other students take dual enrollment with the colleges. Go ahead and take medical terminology while they're still in high school and take it as a dual enrollment course. But for both of these, for medical school also, you want to consider getting other experiences. So in high school, I think it's more about figuring out, is that really what you want to do? If you have a chapter of HOSA, Future Medical Professionals, in your high school, I highly recommend that. I hope that soon we will have the opportunity for students to volunteer at hospitals and do things like that. So yeah, so those would be some ideas to look at. One of the things about applying to medical school is major doesn't matter. The prerequisite courses matter, but also getting involved in patient care. So you've got to find ways to be working with people. That's a big factor, as well as your GPA, obviously, and doing well on the MCAT. Okay, Archana says, so for a major like computer science, what do you recommend students do in high school to make sure they have a sense of whether computer science is indeed the major they want to apply for? Great question. So to the degree that your high school offers anything computer science related, max out those courses. You might get 2 courses in and the student goes, this is not for me. And you know what? I always think that's a win, even when the person decides it's not for me. Like if you get clarity, whether it's positive or negative, that's a win for sure. We've talked about this, I forget when, January maybe or February, but Coursera has some coding type classes. Hackathons can be great and fun, but also give experience for kids who maybe are thinking about computer science. So those would be some great things to do. If in your area there are opportunities, I see a decent number of opportunities for high school internships in the areas of tech. So that would be something else to look for. Okay, Deepa, which are the universities that allow open admission without a student having to declare a major? Deepa, that is, you've got to do your research. So you've got to ask the right questions because there are about 3,500 universities in the United States, and I certainly don't have that memorized. But hopefully, if you listen to this, or you can go back and listen to it again within our Flourish community, our launch community, sorry, on Facebook. And I gave a lot of questions towards the beginning that you want to ask the universities to figure that out. But you really want that answered. On the earlier side, you don't want it when you're getting ready to submit your application. So as you're building your college list. Many engineering programs have no pre-major selection. So how do you ensure you get into the specific engineering program? Well, there's no way to ensure any of this, right? But I think taking the right math and science for engineering, so taking appropriate rigor, which is something we talked about back in January. If you want to watch or rewatch that monthly webinar, it is inside the launch group. Just go to under media and you'll be able to find that there. And having good grades, having excellent letters of recommendation, and writing excellent essays where they get to know you, and that's how they're discerning your fit for sure. Okay, let's see. Julie, this is all great info. What about students who start in one of the narrow majors and then transfer out into something else, and how knowing more about the college curriculum helps prevent that as well? When I worked at the University of New Hampshire, the most common change was a student moving out of engineering because they didn't realize what was involved. That's a fantastic point. One thing that I think goes along with what Julie's saying is, and Julie works with our Flourish team, by the way, and she lives in the Philly area. So one of the things that I would say is definitely when you are on college websites, or if you're doing a visit and you're doing a specific close-up with that university, look at the curriculum, the course of study that needs to be taken, that's going to be taken. So sometimes students get in there and they're like, I had no idea I had to take this much math, or I think that's what Julie's trying to say. So what's more common in her experience when she worked at the university level was kids moving out of engineering into another major because they didn't realize the challenge of engineering, or even what engineering is. I think a lot of people go into engineering because they love math and science, and that is not necessarily the right way to do that. Very good. Thanks, Julie. What does direct entry mean for PA, PT, and OT? I'm glad you asked. I probably should not have used that language. So direct entry means as a high school senior, when I'm applying to a PA, PT, or OT, so physician's assistant is a master's degree after your bachelor's. PT, physical therapy, OT, occupational therapy. Those are doctoral level degrees that you have to earn to practice as a physician's assistant, or I'm sorry, as a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. So direct entry means when the student is applying as a high school senior, they are admitted not only to their undergraduate program, but they are assured placement in the doctoral or master's level program, the graduate program, based on their high school credentials. This is the most selective route into getting into any of these programs. That route does exist also for medical school. Very, very highly selective. However, it removes the pressure from the student of having to find a program, apply, because if you're going to go into those careers, you know, medical school, physician's assistant, PT, OT, and a whole host of other ones that require a master's degree, what you're looking at is having to redo what you do junior year of high school in the junior year of college, where you're you're building your college list for graduate school programs. You're getting ready to apply. You're doing applications again. So you're repeating that all again. So in a lot of these direct entry programs, you know, they do have minimal requirements that you're going to have to adhere to once you're admitted, but that's what we're talking about. So that's what direct entry means. And those are the programs that we were referring to. So sometimes I forget and I use like college admissions vernacular, which I shouldn't do. Does applying to some majors increase your chance of admission at selective colleges? And does applying to a certain major affect the amount of merit aid a college awards? Thank you very much. Okay. So some people sometimes, actually had one of my students ask me this last winter. She said, if at, and it was a selective university, she said, somebody told me maybe I should just apply to economics there and then later try to transfer into my major that I wanted, which was a business major. And when we looked at it, I said, well, let's look at the data behind that. Let's ask the questions, same questions that I'm guiding you all on today, to say, well, let's figure that out together. When we looked at it, it was highly unlikely that that would happen. So again, that would be an internal major change. Is it easier to get into some majors than other majors? Absolutely, yes, that's true. But just because that whole, hey, if I apply to this major that I don't really want and I get admitted and then I later transfer over here to this one, isn't always going to work out in the student's favor. So you really need to do your homework. You'll be able to use a template that I'm giving you and ask the right questions. Remember, it's your student that is asking those questions. It is not you, the parent. The college does not want to hear from you. Does applying to a certain major affect the amount of merit aid at college awards? Very much so. Here's a great example. So I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I know we have people in our group from all over the United States and some people outside the United States. But where I live in Cincinnati in Ohio, popular engineering schools are obviously in state, Case Western, Ohio State, University of Cincinnati. But in our neighboring state, Indiana, Purdue University is also an amazing program. So is University of Michigan to our north. So those are two out-of-state institutions that students that are in my area are actively applying to every single year. What I found is my males who apply to engineering at Purdue get little to no scholarship money from Purdue. My females are awarded scholarships that can make it more affordable to go there than it does to even go to Ohio State sometimes, an in-state school. So gender and major all come into play. You better believe it. So they look at balancing, what they want. So if they got a plethora of males applying to an already male-dominated major, and they've got talented females, they're going to throw money at them to get them to come. So, and that can go for any, I think, I don't know, I'd love to see the stats. And so this is like Lisa talking off the top of her head, and I hope I don't regret it. I wanted to see something else. So as I say this, I'm like, I wonder if still like the gender disparity, like what it looks like in education. In the past, there were more females than males. If that were still the case, and I don't know that that's the case any longer, but if that were still the case, then they'd be throwing money at the males. Nursing, that would be another one. In the past, it was female dominated. And so they would throw the merit money at the males. So it works both ways. They're looking for anybody who's underrepresented in a major, and they're going to be sure to give them, it might be easier for them to get in, and they might get more money. So I think that brings us to the end of our questions. I really love the Q&A part that we have. So in and out in 45 minutes. I like to honor your all time. The email template will be going out tomorrow, and we will be putting the recording in our launch group. If you're not with us in launch, we have fantastic conversations over there. And the conversations help me decide what we're going to be doing in the future with our topics that we have for our other webinars and offerings. So thank you. It was great being with everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful April, and I'll see you again on May the 10th. Thank you. Good night.